When I lost my job, my family gathered, not to comfort me, but to mock, discover the hidden truth. Jake Thompson sat at his childhood dining table, its sturdy wood a stark contrast to the fragility of his current circumstances. The aroma of his mother's famous roast filled the air, momentarily distracting him from the sharp laughter of his relatives. They were gathered for a family dinner, but their jests struck him with a familiar sting. "What's next, Jake? Designing houses with grass roofs?" his brother chimed, laughter erupting around the table, slicing deeper than any critique he had faced in his career. Once, he had commanded the respect of clients, earning accolades as a young and promising architect. Now, sitting among family, he felt like nothing more than a punchline. His spirits drooped under the weight of their cheer, the camaraderie he so desperately yearned for morphing into a taunting chorus. "Remember when Jake dreamed of changing the world through architecture?" his aunt teased. Laughter followed, a dissonant wave crashing over the remnants of his pride. It stirred something profound within him, a vortex of despair and outrage. He had always wanted to be the architect who redefined living spaces, yet all he felt now was inadequate. With every chuckle, his heart raced and thoughts spiraled. How could the people who should lift him up, support him in his unexpected freefall, mock his aspirations? He was unraveling, confronting a moral dilemma. Plunge deeper into the pit of self-doubt, or confront his family and reclaim his dignity. The seconds stretched into eternity as he grappled with the idea of rebellion against a tradition that demanded conformity. Before he could respond, drowning in regret and tension, he found himself drifting further into dreams of sustainable design, a field he'd admired but not fully explored. Maybe this was the catalyst he needed, a way to prove to himself and them that he was still an architect worthy of reverence. Was it possible to redeem not just his career, but the painful mockery he endured? What if you built a house that didn't just create beauty, but actually helped people? It flashed through his mind like a bolt of lightning, a potential lifeline in a storm of ridicule. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He struggled to articulate this newfound clarity, holding back the urge to lash out. The pressure intensified, mixing anger with a desperate urge for validation. His family's laughter faded like a distant echo as thoughts whirled chaotically, each one demanding attention. Would they embrace the new Jake, the architect passionate about social responsibility, or cling stubbornly to the old narrative? Just when he felt the tide might be shifting, shameful whispers echoed across the table. "Jake's back to dreaming big, I see," taunted his cousin, eyes dancing with mischief. The tremors of his once steady resolve shook under the unexpected onslaught, his voice almost escaping in a whisper. "Maybe I can show you, and myself, that I'm still here." Then, the hint of a revelation breathed life back into his thoughts. A forgotten family property cleaved away in time's shadows. What unique design could be unearthed from that dilapidated structure? A connection drawn not just to his future, but to late-night conversations around the table with hopes and aspirations born from childhood dreams. Uncertainty hovered thickly in the air as Jake prepared to confront the truth of both his family's dismissive attitudes and his own internal fears. Would unveiling this shared vision bridge the gap or ignite a devastating conflict? As he looked around the table, the tension surged. Jake knew one truth remained untouchable. The fragile threads binding them could either fray away or weave a new tapestry of understanding and support. Jake swallowed hard, the lump in his throat echoing the turmoil in his chest. The laughter had become a backdrop to a storm of his thoughts, but there was a flicker of determination igniting within him. This was the moment he needed to reclaim not just the dignity they had stripped away, but to forge a new path that might lead him back to the man he once believed he could be. He stood up abruptly, drawing attention away from the convivial atmosphere. "You know," he said, forcing his voice steady, "I'm not just dreaming big. I'm ready to act on it." The words echoed around the room, resistance threading through his tone. Silence blanketed the table as eyes turned expectantly towards him, curiosity piercing the fog of mockery. There was a collective pause, a moment suspended that would either snap back into laughter or spiral into deeper inquiry. "What do you mean?" his sister asked, skepticism laced within the curiosity. "I've been thinking about a project," he continued, his enthusiasm building as he spoke. "There's that old family house that's been left alone for years. I want to renovate it, a sustainable redesign that doesn't just reflect who we are, but serves a purpose. A home that promotes community and cares for the environment." His words surged forth as he painted a vision he could almost see. Rooms embracing sunlight, green roofs giving back to nature, spaces welcoming everyone into a haven of warmth and togetherness. "What are you going to do? Host the neighborhood? Make it a commune or something?" his cousin scoffed, the laughter ready to bubble back up. "Why not?" Jake challenged, each word carrying the weight of his resolve. "What if we could create a space that mattered, that wasn't about looking down on others or playing small? It could be a way for us to give back, change perceptions, and break down barriers. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make a difference." For the first time that evening, his family exchanged glances. The laughter faded, replaced by a flickering tension held captive by curiosity and discomfort. His brother leaned back, his demeanor less mocking, thoughtfully considering the implications of Jake's ambition. "You really think you can make something like that work?" "I have to try," Jake replied, a hint of vulnerability slipping into his voice. "I owe it to myself to explore this possibility, and I owe it to all of us to lift each other up instead of tearing one another down. I want to design something meaningful." Slowly, he began to feel an unfamiliar sensation stirring within him, a determination beginning to morph into purpose. Engendering such thoughts of respect and admiration from his family seemed like a Sisyphean task ahead. Had they ever truly seen the ambition he held beneath the veneer of failure? Then, in that vulnerable moment, Jake's mind raced with the layers beneath their playful jibes. Perhaps they had projected their fears onto him, fear of his dreams, fear of their own perceived failures. Perhaps they recognized that in confronting those fears, he could unearth their collective strengths and reconstruct the fragile threads that bound them. But as resolve coursed through him, anticipation of their reactions blocked the path forward. Would they see the merit of his vision, or would he remain just a punchline? "If I take this on, I need support to show that dreams can become reality," he stated, a challenge woven into his plea. The stakes had escalated, and uncertainty loomed like a storm cloud above them. Jake's realization struck like lightning. It wasn't merely about the house, it was about courage. The courage to embrace purpose, even in the face of ridicule. Would this newfound determination lead to affirmation and shared progress, or would it end in more laughter, leaving him adrift once again? Would he be able to break the insidious mold his family had cast him in? As the din of the dinner returned, a new tension began to bubble forth. Jake could only hope he wasn't stepping into an echo chamber of mockery masquerading as support. A definitive decision awaited him, one that would either unlock the doors of opportunity or slam them shut. The moment hung heavy, a prelude to the conflict ahead. What clarity would emerge from confronting not just his family's disdain, but his own doubts? The time had come for Jake to face those fears head-on. Jake's heart thudded in his chest, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He felt a sharp inhalation of uncertainty mixed with newfound resolve. The murmurs around the table began to swell like an approaching tide, threatening to wash away the fragile foundation he had just built. One misstep, one weak assertion, and he could easily slip back into the familiar territory of ridicule. Drawing strength from his earlier determination, he shifted in his seat, scanning the faces of his family. "I know this sounds ambitious," he stated, forcing the words through the knot in his throat. "But we can't let a fear of failure dictate what we do next. This house isn't just an architectural project, it's a statement about who we are and what we can do when we come together." His cousin rolled his eyes, but Jake noticed a flicker of something different. Not quite support, but perhaps intrigue. That glimmer gave him the courage to push further. "What if I invited each of you to be a part of this, a family effort? We can raise funds, restore it together, not just as an end goal, but as a bonding experience." The air suspended between them crackled with potential. His sister leaned forward, curiosity now visible in her posture. "You really think people would want to invest in a project like that? You don't have any experience with this." "I might not have the experience, but I know people who do. There are architects, designers, and community planners. If I gather a team and pitch this right, we can make it happen. And I'm ready to learn, to open myself up to this. It's time to move beyond limitation." Jake's pulse quickened as he spoke. Each word was not just an invitation to his family, but an assertion of his ability to lead, to create something meaningful. He could feel the shift, the oh-so-slight change in their energy, as though his determination had abstractly thrown light into a shadowy room. But could his family rally behind him through this? He noticed his brother, deep in thought, and the doubt in Jake's own mind began to solidify, a firm specter looming over his aspirations. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? "Every journey starts with a first step," he murmured to himself, but the weight of that prospect lingered unshakably. The deeper concern was palpable. What if they were right? What if he was just setting himself up for more laughter, more disappointment, and ultimately more isolation? A sudden thought struck him, a revelation as sharp as glass. This can't just be about proving something to them. It must also be about proving something to myself, about overcoming my own tendencies to retreat when faced with resistance. The tension at the table shifted once again, morphing from doubt into something almost supportive. They were wary, but Jake sensed a burgeoning curiosity. Perhaps they could understand if he positioned it correctly, if he emphasized the chance for growth that lay within, both for him and for them. With growing confidence, Jake leaned forward. "I believe we have the potential to craft not only a home, but a legacy. Wouldn't that be something we could all stand behind? Can you imagine how incredible it would feel to create a meaningful space together?" As the silence stretched, anticipation swelled, and Jake could sense the pivotal moment teetering on the edge of acceptance or dismissal. Then his brother spoke up, breaking the silence like thunder. "All right, I'll bite, but if you fail, you'll be coming back to us for financing, which means you owe us a big share of whatever happens next." Laughter rippled anew, but this time it was lighter, a recognition of the fragile camaraderie taking shape. Jake couldn't shake the lingering shadows of doubt, but now he also felt the quickening pulse of possibility. The path wasn't clear, but the weight of the resolve was bolstered by the glimmer of support. As he walked cautiously along the edge of fear and anticipation, a question popped into his mind. How could he possibly start this journey effectively without addressing the deeper issues that bound him to his family's perceptions? With determination gripping him tighter than ever, Jake scheduled a meeting with a local architect he had heard about. The foundations were beginning to take shape, and the itch for action surged inside him. But with every step forward, he also knew that he must confront not just his family's doubts, but the very essence of his insecurities. What revelations awaited him in that meeting? Would he find the guidance he so desperately needed, or was he about to confront the next wave of skepticism, this time from someone who truly understood the stakes? Jake arrived at the architect's office, a modest building nestled among more imposing structures downtown. The exterior was unassuming, and as he stepped through the door, he felt an undeniable wave of apprehension wash over him. This was it, the crossroads where he could pivot from being a dreamer to someone capable of actualizing those dreams. The interior was decorated with blueprints and renderings, a tapestry of creative ambitions that engulfed the space. A woman greeted him, her demeanor professional yet warm, and introduced herself as Linda, the architect he had heard about. The moment he entered her office, he was struck by the boldness of her designs, a reflection of her own creative journey. "Jake, right?" she asked, gesturing for him to take a seat. He could hear the caution in her voice, the kind that suggested she was prepared for anything. A naive hopefulness, perhaps, or an ambitious proposal laden with unrealistic expectations. "Yeah," he replied, trying to find confidence in his tone despite the tremor of nervousness that quaked just beneath the surface. "I'm looking to gather support for a family project, something I'd like to turn into a community endeavor." "A community endeavor?" Linda echoed, raising her eyebrows slightly. "What does that entail? What's your vision?" Jake hesitated. He had envisioned this moment countless times, rehearsing the way he would share his bold ideas. Yet, sitting across from an expert, he faltered. "It's about restoring an old family house. I believe it can be more than just a renovation. It could become a meaningful landmark for our family and the community." The words felt heavy on his tongue, not quite carrying the weight of his expectations. Linda's gaze sharpened, processing his ambition in that instant. Restoring a house is one thing, but turning it into a community landmark is another. "Do you have any plans? Any sketches or ideas?" Her question pierced through his momentary fog. He quickly fished through his thoughts, recalling the images of blueprints swirling in his head but struggling to articulate them. "I want to involve my family, bring us together through this. Each of us has something different to contribute. I thought it would, a way to bond, you know." "Bond?" she repeated, seemingly puzzled but intrigued. There was an undercurrent of skepticism that both intrigued and intimidated him. "Right," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I mean, it would represent resilience, the journey of dealing with family issues and fears. It can capture growth and transformation. Why not do that?" He sensed he was floundering, yet he pressed on. "I'd like to portray more than just a space. It should symbolize revival." He watched her assess him, her professional mask slipping slightly to reveal a hint of admiration, a recognition of his vulnerability. "That's a compelling narrative. But you see, Jake, there's a gap between good intentions and execution." Her words echoed in his mind, yet there was something about them that ignited the spark of determination again. "I know that, but I'm willing to learn. I'm ready to invest my effort into making this work." Linda leaned back slightly, her posture relaxing. "All right, I can help you draft a preliminary plan, but we need a solid foundation. You need to further explore your vision, find potential stakeholders, and understand your audience. This will require commitment and a willingness to teach yourself the intricacies of community engagement." Jake felt a swell of hope rising within him. It wasn't enough just to have an idea. He had to become someone capable of making it real. Suddenly, with the enormity of the task echoing in his mind, he questioned whether he could truly face the naysayers and remain steadfast. "Consider this your first lesson, Jake," Linda offered. "It's one thing to dream. It's another to act, to rally your resources, build cohesion, and remain resilient in the face of doubt. This will test you, but growth exists in that discomfort." Her insights resonated deeply, revealing not just the challenge ahead, but the pivotal crossroads of his own maturity. There was a dark corner within him that tugged on his motivations, an unsettling reminder of his family's skepticism. As the meeting wound down, Jake's determination solidified. He wasn't merely crafting a project, but constructing resilience against the ridicule he had always feared. The difficulty still loomed, and the shadows of doubt reached out for him, challenging his resolve. What awaited him, as he began to navigate this daunting maze of expectations and insecurities. Would he truly rise from the ashes of his self-doubt, or would old fears anchor him down once more? Jake left Linda's office feeling a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. The path before him was now illuminated with possibilities, yet the shadows of his past lingered just beyond the light. He took a deep breath, aching to transition from trembling uncertainty to measured confidence. Every step he took echoed in the recesses of his mind. He wasn't just chasing an idea, he was on the precipice of a personal transformation. His first order of business was to gain clarity on his vision. He needed to articulate his ideas clearly, transitioning from vague hopes into tangible plans. Back at home, he spread an array of papers across the dining table, each one a fragment of thoughts that needed to evolve. He stared at the blank pages, confronting a tangle of ambition and inadequacy. Could he even represent the history and emotions tied to that house adequately? Determined, he leaped into research. The deluge of information consumed him. He dissected articles about architectural restoration, studied local history, and looked for inspiration in successful community projects. Each click and scroll planted seeds of knowledge, yet self-doubt crept in as unintended weeds. What if nobody cared about this project? What if he failed to bring his family together? What if they laughed at his attempts, just as they had done before? Amid this whirlwind of thought, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He recalled Linda's words about commitment and audience understanding. He needed to reach out to potential stakeholders and community members who could support his vision. Networking felt foreign, yet he knew it was crucial. Hesitantly, he drafted a list of local businesses and non-profit organizations, his fingers hovering above the keys of his computer, wrestling with the first hurdle of outreach. The first email he crafted was full of hope, trembling yet optimistic. Yet with every intentioned sentence, the nagging inner critic returned. Would anyone want to partner with him? He was just an amateur with a fledgling dream. With a shaky exhale, he pressed send, prompting a small thrill as the message whizzed into oblivion. Days passed, and with each moment, a more profound lesson settled on his shoulders. Patience. He awaited responses with mounting anticipation, a mixture of hope and dread coiling ever tighter around his heart. Finally, perseverance bore fruit. 2 local organizations expressed interest in collaborating. Jake felt a spark of elation, a tangible sign that his dreams were not entirely unfounded. Yet, this came paired with a new conflict. Now he had to prepare for meetings, articulate his vision, and regulate his nerves. As the days turned into weeks, each meeting with volunteers unveiled a world of talents and motivations he hadn't anticipated. Jake discovered a knack for listening, resonating with their input, and cleverly weaving it back into his own vision. His confidence grew with each interaction, and the way he shared his vision crystallized into a narrative that emphasized connection, growth, and resilience. Essentially, what he had craved for himself and his family. But just as his initiatives began to flourish, a single phone call sent a riptide through his momentum. His mother's voice was tight, full of worry. She had encountered a family member who scoffed at his ambitions, mocking not just the project but him, the dreamer, still attached to fantasies. The stab of that ridicule burned through him like acid, old fears igniting. Jake hung up, his mind reeling with hurt and indignation. He had finally begun to rise from the depths of self-doubt, only to be yanked back into the fray. A part of him itched to abandon the project, to retreat to the comfortable embrace of anonymity. Yet another part, stronger and more defiant, rose up, questioning what kind of person he would become if he let fear dictate his course. This was no longer about just restoring a house. It was about transforming himself from the inside out. But how would he confront this renewed skepticism, especially when it came from those who should have been his greatest supporters? Would he stand firm in the face of those jibes, or would he once again allow the weight of his past to stifle his growth? The stakes felt higher than ever. The time had come to face not just the external doubts, but the ones that whispered within. Jake spent the night grappling with his thoughts. The soft hum of the living room clock ticked like a metronome to his racing heart. He paced, each step echoing a mantra in his mind. Was he truly a dreamer, or just someone who had lost his way? The familiar sting of ridicule cut through him, but as he stood in the dim light, he felt a peculiar shift. He had to reshape his narrative. He wasn't merely pursuing a project, he was cultivating a legacy. The dim specter of self-doubt, once looming large, began to shrink under the weight of this new understanding. He remembered Linda's encouragement, the importance of resilience. Wasn't this adversity an opportunity to redefine his limits? With renewed fervor, he picked up the papers strewn across the dining table. The sketches of the house he wanted to restore suddenly felt meaningful, not just decorative. Each line, each detail held potential stories waiting to be told. He took a deep breath, refocused his energy, and set to work. Jake began detailing a plan that felt both ambitious and attainable. He applied structured steps to the chaos swirling in his mind: identify goals, outline methods, and map interactions. He envisioned the day of completion, the house standing proud, a testament not just to bricks and mortar, but to family reconciliation, adaptability, and growth. His growth. Days turned into weeks, and as he meticulously crafted his plan, he found unexpected allies in his network. The two organizations he contacted were enthusiastic, offering resources and contacts that bloomed into possibilities he hadn't imagined. Their support felt invigorating, but also presented new complexities. Would he be able to manage the expectations and contributions of others while preserving his vision? Determined, his meetings with the volunteers transformed into collaborative workshops. Jake skillfully facilitated discussions, honing his ability to articulate his vision while inviting input. Each time he saw community members nodding in agreement, the reaffirmation felt like a shield against the jeering voices of family and past failures. Yet, an ember of doubt flickered. Would the same support fade when challenges arose, or would they stand steadfast alongside him? As the first collaborative meeting drew to a close, Jake was surprised by a wave of gratitude. Those who had initially come to merely lend an ear found themselves invested, sharing stories of their own familial challenges and aspirations. They were slowly becoming more than volunteers. They were collaborators, with a vested interest in the outcome of the project. With growing confidence, he began to see their laughter not as mockery, but as the sounds of shared hope. Maybe these weren't incomplete dreams. They were stepping stones toward something greater. Yet when he glanced at his phone, he felt an uneasy tightness in his abdomen. A message from his mother cropped up on the screen. "Let me know how it's going with your project. We're all curious." The equivocation gnawed at him, and he hesitated, his fingers hovering over the virtual keyboard. He had spent weeks distancing himself from self-doubt, but here it was again, demanding his attention. Would sharing this journey with them, telling them about the excitement and support he had found, expose him to more ridicule? He knew he had a choice. Send a heartfelt update or cloak himself in silence, shielding his aspirations from the very people whose opinions used to matter most. The moment hung before him like a pendulum, swinging between risk and safety. In that moment of indecision, he felt the dual weight of desire and fear. It drew the line between who he was and who he wanted to be, mirroring the renovation process he so keenly pursued. Would he polish away old doubts or allow them to dominate? As he contemplated his next move, his phone vibrated again, echoing like a drumbeat of urgency. What lay ahead? Would he finally confront the skepticism he had long avoided, or retreat behind the walls he had spent weeks breaking down? The answer loomed just beyond reach, and for the first time in a long while, he felt excited and terrified to discover what would come next. Jake stared at the glowing screen, feeling the warmth of the device radiate against his palm. His mother's message swirled in his mind, a vortex of hope and trepidation. What if he sent an update and was met with sneers rather than support. Yet deep down, he recognized that this project could redefine more than just the house. It could reshape his relationship with his family. With resolve, he took a moment to compose a response. He detailed the project's progress, highlighting the collaborative spirit that had emerged and the bonds forming among the volunteers. Each word carried a weight, a measured step towards reclaiming his narrative. Instead of sending just information, he intentionally revealed his vulnerabilities, laying bare his initial fear of failure. The truth slipped through the cracks of uncertainty, momentarily liberating him. He hit send and felt a rush of adrenaline, but rather than elation, dread pooled in his stomach, conjuring doubt at the fringes of his mind. What if they dismissed his efforts as a mere pastime? He glanced at the clock again. The familiar ticking resumed, its rhythm matching his heartbeat once more. Hours stretched into an exhausting silence, filled with an unease that gnawed at him. Would he receive a message of understanding or one steeped in derision? As night crept in, the uninvited shadows of doubt returned, whispering that he might have foolishly opened the door to his past. Several notifications later, a reply from his mother flashed across the screen. He held his breath, scanning her words. The initial warmth stung as he read her enthusiasm. She praised his ability to gather support, but abruptly pivoted to a question. "Why can't you just get a real job? This seems like an easy route." Her words struck him like a blow, exposing the vulnerability he had tried to conceal. Anger flared within him, but beneath that was a more familiar sorrow. The feeling of dismissal echoed through him, reverberating old scars. Would he ever be seen as more than a punchline in their family narrative? Biting his lip, Jake pushed away from his desk, moments of reflection surfacing like a tide. Retracing the steps that had brought him to this point, he stood up, gathering his energy in defiance. Each complaint from his mother echoed the fears he'd been grappling with for years. Was he simply taking the easy way out, or was he truly brave enough to face the complexities of his dreams? He turned back to his sketches. The detailed plans sprawled out under the dim light. Despite the recent storm of emotions, he realized that this path was laden not just with the possibility of failure, but with potential and connection, both professionally and personally. Determination swelled in his chest. As he focused on the structural framework of the house on paper, he began to mentally construct the familial relationships he yearned to fortify. Perhaps this project could dismantle the barriers that had long stood rigid between him and his family. To confront their judgment, he decided, would be to reclaim authority over his life's narrative. Jake sat back down, fingers hovering above the keyboard once more. This time, he wasn't just ready to update them. He felt compelled to invite them into the process. Could he share not just his ambition, but also the desire for their understanding, their support, rather than cringing at their possible mockery? With each sentence, he expressed the pride he felt in what he was building, urging them to see beyond their skepticism. But just as he summoned the last vestiges of courage to send the message, an incoming call disrupted his thoughts. His heart quickened, not out of fear, but anticipation. The caller ID flashed Linda's name, and he knew she was a vital ally in this moment of reckoning. Taking a deep breath, Jake accepted the call, unaware that the conversation would set a new trajectory for not only his project, but the strained ties binding him to his family. "Hey, have you thought about involving your family more?" Linda's question hung in the air like a challenge. He faltered, realizing he was at a crossroads, with his past whispering caution, while a shimmering vision of what could be unfurled ahead. The time to embrace change and face the consequences had arrived. Jake took a moment, the question echoing in his mind as he leaned against his cluttered desk, artifacts of his project scattered about like a battlefield. Linda's suggestion felt unprecedented. Involving his family? Wouldn't that only open doors to more judgment and ridicule? Yet the glimmer of possibility sharpened his senses. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "I mean, your project sounds exciting. Inviting them to participate could give them a different perspective. It's a way to bridge that gap you've mentioned. Let them see firsthand what you're building, both literally and metaphorically." Jake's heart pounded in the silence that ensued. This was a risky gamble, a potential minefield. There was comfort in the familiar isolation he had cultivated. But as he looked at the sketches sprawled out before him, that order began to dissolve. If this project was meant to furnish a home, perhaps it could also create a space for understanding, an exchange of experiences. "Think about it," Linda pressed on. "What if you turned this project into a family affair? Use it as an opportunity to communicate. You might even gain allies in the process." Allies. The word lingered like a siren's song, filling him with hope, yet suffused with dread. What if their involvement only solidified the critical voices that had shadowed his aspirations? He could already hear their doubts echoing in his mind. Deep down, however, was a flicker of something else, a longing for support that had been absent for so long. "Maybe you're right," he admitted, his voice steadier than before. "But how do I even start that conversation?" "Start small. Invite them over for a family meeting. Show them what you're working on. Express your mission and your vision. Share your fears about how they perceive you. Sometimes honesty can disarm. Just be ready for awkwardness." The idea of laying bare his ambitions before them was daunting, but Jake felt a spark of resolve ignite within him. If he could withstand their scrutiny alone, how would he fare in their company, armed with transparency? He wondered if he might reveal strengths he had long since buried under layers of self-doubt. "Okay," Jake agreed, his stomach twinging with a mix of nerves and determination. "I'll give it a shot. I won't let their judgments define me anymore." As the call ended, he found himself staring at the empty wall above his workbench. In its blankness, he saw potential. He had always viewed his project as solitary, a task to conquer single-handedly. Now, it was morphing into something collective, a potential family endeavor. The thought shifted something deep within him. The looming shadows of doubt dulled as a form of empowerment surged forth. This venture would no longer be a mere response to criticism, but an invitation to reclaim his own narrative, his family as collaborators rather than critics. That was a revolutionary thought. Days passed and preparations began. Each invitation felt monumental, as if he were opening a door to a new realm filled with possibility. He created a comprehensive presentation of his plans, ensuring it was not just logistics, but also a canvas for shared dreams and fears. But just as he pieced together his final thoughts, a nagging doubt resurfaced. What if their response was overwhelmingly negative? What if all his efforts crumbled beneath familial scrutiny? Setting the presentation on the large table, Jake took a deep breath the day of the meeting. The reality of what he was about to face weighed heavily on him. Moments before they were due to arrive, he looked around, examining the sketches one last time. He was about to face not only his family, but a confrontation with years of unspoken histories and buried aspirations. Would his vulnerability break down barriers, or would it lead to more hurt? This engagement could unravel obstacles he had faced for far too long, or pile on new layers of complexity. The time had come to confront their perceptions, not just of him, but perhaps their own reflections. As he heard the front door click open, the rush of emotions surged. Intrigue, fear, and layers of anticipation collided violently within him as, finally, he heard their voices. Facing them felt like confronting an army. Would he emerge victorious, or would he stand fragile and defeated? As the footsteps approached, Jake's heart raced, each thud echoing his inner turmoil. The front door creaked open, and there they were, his parents and sibling, faces adorned with curiosity but tinged with skepticism. They filed into the living room, the familiar smell of pizza mixing with the scent of paint and sawdust that lingered in his workspace. The casual banter that usually filled the room fell to an expectant silence as Jake straightened, gripping the edges of the presentation board with sweaty palms. "Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming," he managed, the words a soft tremor against the weight of his apprehension. His father's gaze flicked over the designs sprawled across the table, the bright colors and jagged sketches clashing with his expression of critical examination. "So, what's this all about?" he asked, the challenge implicit. Jake took a deep breath, channeling the resolve he felt earlier. "I wanted to share something important with all of you. This project isn't just about building, it's about making something meaningful, a space that reflects who we are as a family." The words hung in the air, suddenly feeling inadequate. His brother leaned back, arms crossed, a skeptical eyebrow raised. "What do you mean, who we are? Is this just another way to prove you can do something right?" A stab of hurt shot through Jake, a familiar sting that echoed from years of feeling misunderstood. But instead of retreating, he steeled himself, stepping forward. "No, it's not about proving anything. This is about inviting you in, sharing my journey, my vision. I need your support, even if it feels uncomfortable." The words were raw, each syllable a piece of Jake's vulnerability laid bare. He glanced at his mother, who had shifted uneasily in her seat. "What if we don't like it?" she finally asked, the hesitation unspooling the tension among them. In that moment, Jake recognized the power lurking beneath the surface of their apprehension. This was more than a project. It was a challenge to the unbalance of expectation simmering beneath their interactions. "What if you don't like it? That's okay," he replied, voice gaining strength. "I'm sharing this because I've spent too long fearing judgment. I want to open a dialogue, not close one off." He gestured to the sketches, tracing the lines he poured his heart into. "Each of these represents a part of me, something I've battled to articulate. I'm here to receive feedback, yes, but I'm also asking for connection." Their expressions began to shift, curiosity wrestling with doubt. His brother uncrossed his arms slightly, leaning in with interest. Jake saw a glimmer of something shift, a willingness to listen. He seized it, delivering a passionate overview of his vision, inviting them to see what he saw. As he spoke, obstacles transformed into opportunities. Each question from them became a chance to clarify his intentions, to reinforce his commitment to this new narrative. Slowly, the skepticism melted away like morning fog, revealing a dialogical landscape where ideas could flourish rather than falter. But just as the atmosphere warmed, a sharp voice broke through, seeping with derision. "You really think we're going to buy into this, Jake? You've tried and failed before. Why should we believe you now?" Jake's body went rigid as the sting of betrayal clouded his thoughts. His brother's remark cut deep, reopening old wounds. His facade of confidence frayed. The shadows of doubt crept back in, threatening to engulf the light he had cultivated. He felt the fight rise within him, but this time it wasn't fueled by desperation. It was energized by the realization that every barrier they erected could be navigated. Every doubt could be transformed into a stepping stone toward clarity and growth. With a renewed sense of purpose, he locked eyes with his brother, his voice steady. "You're right, I have stumbled, but every fall has taught me something. Isn't that what we get to do together?" His family remained silent, the tension thick in the air. Would they embrace this chance for connection or reject it as they had so many times before? With the uncharted terrain of their relationships laid out before him, Jake felt a pulse of determination quicken within him. The battle for recognition had begun, and the outcome was still uncertain. But would they choose to stand together, or would their fears render them immobile once again? The stakes had never been higher. Jake stood at the crossroads of resolve and vulnerability, the atmosphere charged with a mixture of tension and anticipation. His family's skepticism loomed like a heavy cloud, threatening to overshadow the warmth that had begun to blossom with his vision. Yet he was no longer the same man who had sat in silence at the dinner table, absorbed in the sting of laughter. He had transformed into someone fortified by ambition, ready to reclaim his narrative. As silence enveloped the room, he took a deep breath, the fear that had once dictated his decisions now boiling down to focused determination. "I understand your concerns. Thank you for voicing them," he began, his tone steady as he faced his brother's challenging gaze. "But I've spent months building a vision that goes beyond my aspirations. I want to create something meaningful for all of us." Each word was an invocation, a thread weaving together the fragmented experiences of doubt and enlightenment. This isn't just a project. It's about healing connections, inviting us all to become entwined in a legacy. The fervor in his voice captivated even the most skeptical members of his audience. As he elaborated on his plans, he painted a vivid picture of the revitalized family home, a symbol not just of architectural prowess, but of familial resilience and shared growth. Imagine a space filled with light where we can gather, learn, and create together, not only as family, but as a reflection of community values, he urged, passionately guiding each family member toward the possibility of shared contributions. His father leaned forward, the skepticism in his eyes dulled by curiosity, as Jake detailed plans to incorporate sustainable materials and designs that echoed family history while embedding social impact into the project. The barriers they had constructed began to dissolve, revealing a pathway to collaboration. With every explanation grounded in clarity and authenticity, Jake could see glimmers of acceptance igniting in his family's expressions. They were beginning to envision themselves not merely as spectators, but as participants in this venture. His mother spoke next, hesitantly at first. I appreciate your effort to involve us, Jake, but can you really pull this off, after everything you faced?" The doubt in her voice was tinged with the tenderness of concern, pulling at Jake's heartstrings. "Yes," he replied firmly, bolstered by months of painstaking preparation. "I found a team willing to support me, and we'll take this step by step. This is about community and contribution, but it begins with us, right here." Silence loomed again, thick with contemplation. Then, as if some invisible force had shifted in the atmosphere, his brother broke into a smile, a smirk that held no mockery but genuine intrigue. "All right then, if you're running this show, count me in. I'll help with the funding side of it." Relief washed over Jake like a tide, carrying with it the weight of doubt that had anchored him for years. "That's all I ask," he responded, the heaviness falling away. "Let's make decisions together and create something we can all be proud of." As his family members exchanged glances, an unspoken understanding bloomed. Skepticism transformed into curiosity, and curious minds began to explore the invitation Jake had extended. His sister nodded, adding her interest in design ideas, while his parents began jotting down thoughts, embracing the fray they once avoided. In that moment, Jake felt the profound satisfaction of forging not just a physical project, but an emotional connection. He had managed to dismantle the years of ridicule and fear, stepping into a new identity as an architect of his life, rather than a mere dreamer of others' expectations. Weeks turned into months, and with every step they took as a family, Jake grew into a role he had yearned for. He coordinated plans, facilitated meetings, and watched their laughter replace the tension once anchored to the past. As they embarked on the renovation of their family home, the shadows that had echoed disapproval began to fade, unveiling a tapestry of unity and understanding. On the day of their grand unveiling, the house stood vibrant and breathing with life, lush greenery cascading from the rooftop, open spaces inviting warmth and solace. His family gathered, eyes sparkling with pride as they walked through the transformed corridors, the very air bustling with laughter and conversation. Jake's heart swelled, an overwhelming sense of achievement washing over him. He had conquered the internal and external battles, transforming mockery into support, doubt into belief. The architect who once felt adrift had now crafted a solid foundation, not just in his profession, but in his familial relationships. "Welcome home, everyone," he declared, his voice echoing against the walls now filled with shared aspirations. In that moment, Jake realized his journey had become more than the renovation of a house. It was an affirmation of his personal growth, his commitment to forging meaningful connections, and a testament to resilience. He had tapped into his true self, validated by the recognition of those he once sought approval from, now standing beside him as equals in growth. Jake had achieved his metamorphosis. He was not just an architect, but a bridge connecting past struggles with future potential, a narrative transformed, a legacy built. Embrace your dreams. You need to subscribe now to stay connected to journeys like Jake's. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to keep these stories alive. We want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts about this uplifting conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share instantly with 5 friends who need to witness this transformation.